I was intrigued when I discovered this. He calls it the Omega Project. For the first time ever, our planet was run by a single power called Prometheus, amplified by an intelligence so vast that it could potentially enable life to flourish for billions of years throughout the cosmos. But what specifically was their plan? And he goes on to indicate this Prometheus, one massive feature is complete social and economic control of buying and selling. Now listen to the book of Revelation, written 20 centuries ago. Now this is imagery, but listen to it. It, that is the beast, deceives those who dwell on the earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword and yet lived. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak, and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. Also, it causes all to be marked on their right hand, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark that is the name of the beast and the number of his name. People often laugh at that. But this is the very scenario that will flow out of the current social control AI systems in China, which Tegmark singles out as an example of what might happen in the future. People say, but this is imagery. But just a minute. They obviously haven't listened to C.S. Lewis. Because C.S. Lewis points out that imagery and metaphor always stand for reality. There's always a reality behind them. So if we ask, what is this beast? The book of Revelation gives the answer in the very same context. Let's listen to it. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who is understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Please notice what it's not saying. It's not telling you who it is. It's telling you what it is. The beast is human. That is the central message of this. You know, historically, people have tried to decode this gematria, putting numbers for letters, and work out who it is, and they've been spectacularly successful. Hitler has been in, Stalin's been in, virtually everybody. But that isn't the point. Because you see, if this human who behaves like a beast is revealed by the power of Satan and controls the whole world, you'll not have to play guessing games with numbers to know who it is. It'll be obvious. The 666 will simply be a check. Do we take it seriously? This is the way that Tegmark starts his book, talking about Prometheus. Here we have it in Scripture. Why shouldn't we take Scripture seriously? I see no reason why not to. I see increasing reason to do that. That's the negative side, and it clearly is not a very pleasant prospect, although we can see what's happening in our world is moving very rapidly towards it. It is highly credible, and it's credible because Paul said to these people, it's already working in your own society. The Caesars were calling themselves gods, and they were insisting that the Christians bow down and worship, and many a Christian lost his or her life for refusing to do it. Now he says, you watch the trends in your society, this deification of emperors, watch where it goes. This is where it's going to go to. And here are the AGI people telling us exactly the same thing on the basis of our speculations. I think we need to take these texts much more seriously than we've ever done in the past. But there's good news, you know, because there's a divine upgrade phase 2.
Hey, what's up guys? Gons here for the Face Like the Sun channel. I wanted to play a clip from a lecture that was published last night. That was October 9th, 2018. And it was a lecture by Professor John Lennox. Now, if you don't know who John Lennox is, he is one of the top Christian apologists out there right now. He's a mathematician as well as a philosopher and a theologian, and he's got all kinds of doctorates in all sorts of areas. He's definitely one of the most intelligent people in terms of academia, and he's a Christian. He is a hardcore Christian. I mean, he's one of the best apologists out there. And I was really excited to see this lecture, Should We Fear Artificial Intelligence? Because I was curious about where Professor John Lennox was going to take this discussion. And I was thrilled to hear some of the things he brought up in this conversation. It really is such a huge confirmation for the stuff that we've been talking about on this channel. In fact, he basically summarizes Age of Deceit 2 in this little clip I want to play for you. So this is a few minutes, about an hour in to this lecture here, Should We Fear Artificial Intelligence? Actually, it's a half hour in because the lecture doesn't get started until about 27 minutes into the video. But I wanted to play this clip because he basically summarizes the heart of the issue of transhumanism and AI. And this is coming from one of the leading scholars in academia, okay, for Christianity in terms of defending the faith. I just think it's very, very powerful that he went to this place, which is all these points that we've been making in this community of the fringe. Well, it's being brought and presented in the academic world. So anyway, let me play this clip for you. He's talking about consciousness here, and he starts off by implying that nobody really knows what consciousness is. So let's begin here.
And here's the big barrier in constructing a superintelligence. The biggest hurdle is consciousness, because no one has any idea what consciousness is. But there's something more. You see, I said that self-driving cars don't have a conscience. So some sort of morality has to be built in. That's the morality of the programmers. So self-driving cars separate intelligence and conscience. AI separates them, but God links them. Because in the Genesis account, we have a tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Please, it's not the tree of knowledge. God didn't want to keep people from knowledge. There was loads of it in the garden. This kind of knowledge is a knowledge you don't want to have. And the analysis in Genesis is something that is way beyond any capacity or beginnings of a capacity of an AI system. Because here, God explains to us what it means to be a moral being. In simple terms, they had freedom to eat of all the trees. God said, don't eat of that one. They had freedom to eat, otherwise the prohibition would have been meaningless.
Before we go on, that's such an important point right there, alluding to the Garden of Eden, that don't eat from this one tree. That commandment is what creates this free will, and whether obedience even makes sense and matters. You know, if God didn't allow the ability to reject him and sin and fall this way, then obedience wouldn't mean anything. We would just be automatons, right? And I think it's fascinating how he attaches this philosophical point to the AI creationists. But these are points that I've brought up before in videos, but he does it very well and concisely, and only the way Professor John Lennox can. But let me continue here.
And of course, we know the story, that they disobeyed God. The first morality was vertical. It was determined by God. Now, this is a huge problem. If you reject God and you're building all kinds of systems that interact with human beings, what morality are you going to build into them? Where are you going to get it from? Because if there isn't a God, I would want to argue that morality ends up being essentially subjective. Now, that's another huge topic. But it's important that we see again what Genesis says, because this creature that God built in his image grasped at autonomy and brought sin and disaster into the world. Do you know what many people in the robotics world and AI world fear? Exactly the same thing happening to their creations. And interestingly enough, a leading scientist draws the parallel. And she says, if we see the Genesis account of the fall as foreshadowing of fears about robots, then Genesis gets the problem exactly right, for exactly the right reasons. It's a worry about autonomy itself. What might robots do if we can't control them fully? And there, of course, she's thinking of robots with AI systems together. We can thank, she says, the Hebrew account of Genesis for pre-warning us about this danger thousands of years ago. So there has been a conference of some of the world's leading thinkers to try and get people to agree to impose morality on any of these developments, lest something gets out of control. One of the leading researchers in the world on artificial intelligence is a Christian believer at MIT. Her name is Rosalind Picard, and she uses AI systems to get into the inner heart of autistic children. And she's done wonderful work in helping those children. And she writes a general point: the greater the freedom of a machine, the more it will need moral standards. So Genesis raises the morality question. There is concern about it, even when talking about hypothetical super-intelligent machines. But there was another tree in the garden, and that is the tree of life. And we remember that one of Harari's propositions was that in this century, we are going to solve the problem of physical death, are we?
Okay, before I go on here, if you are a patron, you've seen like a short snippet, like a, I don't know, minute and a half snippet of Age of Deceit 3, where I play some of the intro stuff that I had going with editing the whole section. And the section included a quote from Noah Harari, who published the book Homo Deus, A Brief History of Tomorrow, where he pretty much says that, death is this, it's this old thing of theologians and priests. Now the engineers have taken over. Death is just a matter of solving in the lab. And again, this is a book that's being sold to millions and millions of people, influencing people. And there are other aspects to this that ties to a particular nation state that I won't get into in this video. However, the implications here that Dr. Lennox is discussing, he is right on point, folks. I mean, to the point where I'm thinking, man, have you been watching my videos? Because he gets into some points that are really succinct and really, really match up with what I've been trying to talk about and discuss on this channel for years, as well as this entire community. This really, guys, for you guys who have been around talking about these issues, discussing it and bringing it up in conversation, watching videos like this one, or like, people that are discussing similar issues from a Christian biblical perspective. This is great confirmation that we are right on track in terms of understanding these issues and talking about these issues. We're at the tip of the spear on this discussion. We are the first Christians to be like, hey, there's definitely something going on here, and it has a very biblical overtone. And so I don't care if you're a secularist, okay, or a materialist or an atheist, a scientist, whatever, it doesn't matter. We need to have this discussion because it immediately brings the discussion between anybody, any faith. It immediately brings the discussion to the origin of our consciousness, our mind, but also the dealings of the mind, morality, ethics, and the mythological overtones, which are very, very apparent as well. That's why we're seeing science fiction tackle this issue head on, because it's like, wow, it's right in front of us, and here we are. We can speculate on how it's going to look within a few decades or a few years. But this is, again, as I said in Age of Deceit 2, the whole point of Age of Deceit 2 was that this thing that they're trying to do with physical immortality, cyber immortality, whatever, is precisely what the mythological, plan of alchemy has been doing forever.
and that is the tree of life. And we remember that one of Harari's propositions was that in this century we are going to solve the problem of physical death. Are we? Because Genesis raises some very interesting points. It tells us that when humans disobeyed God, he removed from them a source of food that if they had had access to it would have kept them physically alive forever. That's what the text says. And you begin to wonder if the search for physical immortality all goes back to this story, that God excluded them from it. And you've probably read in classical mythology the search for the elixir of life. And now the modern version is the search for Homo Deus.
Oh my gosh, I still get goosebumps when I hear him say that. It's like, dude, you're right on point. That is precisely, the big picture here of this topic of transhumanism and AI, artificial general intelligence. Where is it all going? What does the Bible have to do with it? This exact point. And so what John Lennox said here, I was really, again, I got goosebumps just hearing him say this. It's just great confirmation for all of us who have been discussing these issues. But at the same time, this is just the beginning. This is the reality is this is going to hit us more so. And it's not going to just be a discussion. It's going to be people walking around that basically, as Dr. Hugo de Garis described, imagine, I don't have a video camera here, but imagine grabbing your cell phone, all right, and then just holding it in your hand and then smacking your forehead with it, because that's what is essentially going to happen here eventually.
So Harari projects into the future, and his idea is that we're going to upgrade humans into gods. The biblical answer to it is spectacular. Because there is a Homo Deus, a man who is God. But it's not man becoming God. It's God becoming man. And the heart of the Christian faith is that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, evidenced by his resurrection and his ascension. There is a Homo Deus. We don't have to wait for Harari or Kurzweil or anybody else to create a man who is God. There is a man who is God. Now, isn't it interesting, ladies and gentlemen, that when someone like Harari or Kearse says this is going to happen, people say, oh, that's fascinating. But when we claim that there is a man who is God, oh, they say you couldn't possibly believe that. That's the Bible, isn't it? And what I want to argue to you tonight seriously is this. We have come to a very important moment where we can see in our culture ideas that are parodies of what we've already got in the Bible, which gives us a remarkable opportunity to speak into what's going on. Now, one of the hopes of these people, you've probably heard it, is to upgrade ourselves and become more intelligent and all this kind of thing. But you see, there is already in existence a divine upgrade. And phase one is that any one of us, by trusting Christ as Lord and Saviour, who died for our sins, can become what we were not by nature, a child of God. That is a spectacular divine upgrade, isn't it? And that can already happen. We don't have to wait for it. We can receive the life of God, and perhaps by looking at it against the background of AI, we can see just how remarkable this is. We have something to say to our world. They're searching for it. They're nowhere near it. They're trying to get there. But we can say, look, God has become man. There is a man who is God. He has risen from the dead. And he invites everybody to become children of God, receiving a new life, eternal life, by trusting him. To as many as received him, he gave the right to become children of God. The serpent said, in the day you eat thereof, you shall be homo deus, you shall be as gods. Here's the biblical answer to that. God doesn't want to suppress anybody. He wants to make us his children, in his family, with the same kind of life as he has got. But there's more. The homo deus was here. He's left. He's returning. And publicly, to his judges, Jesus said, you shall see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of God and coming on the clouds of heaven. Privately to his disciples, he said, it was said to his disciples, this same Jesus shall so come as you saw him go. Homo Deus is going to return.
Now, guys, if that doesn't get you just feeling incredibly encouraged, edified, I don't know what will, man. I mean, he basically confirmed our ministry, this ministry that exists on the internet right now. These people, random folks like myself. I'm no one special, guys. I'm just a guy here. You know, I'm a dude. I'm a dad. You know, I'm a husband. I love the Word. I love Jesus, and I really have this sincere grief and I guess just this sense of urgency to warn the world of what's coming, but wrapped in that warning is the gospel message of Jesus Christ that is so liberating. It liberates us from everything. And again, these discussions are going to happen more and more, to the point where I believe that it will become such an issue, a public issue, that the prophetic warnings about an open killing of Christians going after the saints. Revelation says that. It says that the beast that rises out of the sea, you know, and all the components of it, that, by the way, for Age of Deceit 3, I'm breaking down the components. It is fascinating, folks. That's all I'm going to show you for now, but I'm telling you guys, Age of Deceit 3 and some of the things that I want to discuss straight from the scriptures, just to give us a potential roadmap of what's to come. Not saying I'm a prophet. I'm not saying that I'm, you know, that I know what it's going to be or how long it's going to take, or none of those things. That's not the point. The point is the discussion at hand here, which is AI, or artificial general intelligence, robotics, computing, what it's doing to our biology, what it's doing to us. Obviously, the thing that really, you know, I think is important to nail down and explain to people, especially if they come from the evolutionary paradigm, the theory of evolution being sort of the backdrop or paradigm that allows God, the biblical God, to be omitted and sort of removed from the inquiry about the universe and the world. And therefore, you know, John Lennox goes into this earlier in the discussion. Therefore, you know, they kind of flip the idea. They're looking at it from the material and suggesting, you know, some sort of, or trying to ascribe or assign a sort of morality to physical reality, right? It's not the other way around. It's not God spoke creation into existence, right? God, let there be light. In the beginning, God said, let there be light. God said, he spoke. You know, a mind spoke something, and then physical existence happened, which means that the realm of the mind, where morality exists, is real. It's the real thing. It's the sort of source. It's the origin before physical manifestation. And so that ties together, and that gets into quantum theory. I mean, again, folks, we're getting into this really crazy time where I think the idea of, you know, that small phrase in the book of Daniel, knowledge will increase. And we've always been like, oh yes, knowledge has increased so much in the last 100 years, and this must be talking about the prophetic nature of you know, the end times. And I'm saying, yeah, I think that sentiment is correct, but I think even us being part of the rise of the tides of these issues, I don't think even we anticipated the level of discussions or the level of knowledge that is going to be required. But here's what's interesting, isn't it? Even though this is such a departure from the norm in terms of discussing these issues, technology, science, you know, apotheosis in the physical machinery that is going to assist us to that point, the Bible doesn't become irrelevant. It becomes more relevant. And that to me is fascinating. That is a fascinating sociological phenomenon that will, I think, take place even more, and it'll become more public. And I think declaring your faith will become less of a stigma when we have these foundational points that are not only very strong intellectually, but resonates deep within our personal experiences. It's going to lead to a point where, again, this is really clearly, in my mind, this forking of humanity, where one part of humanity is going to go this one direction of, cyborg and creating this, what the Dr. Hugo de Garis calls the art elect, and then the other side where we just remain human, and I think a good portion of those people that want to remain human are going to be preaching the gospel because it makes the most sense. It's like, you guys, you're destroying yourselves. We are destroying ourselves by doing this, So, anyways, I just wanted to share this with you. Please watch this entire lecture. Again, it's a 2.5 hour thing, but the lecture really doesn't get going until about a half hour in. And I just think it's a really good sign for the church, at least in terms of the realm of academia, in certain echelons, if you will, that Dr. Lennox is addressing it from this angle, which is, you guys, I don't think you guys understand the significance of this, of why I'm so pumped about this. This is a scholar, like multiple PhDs and whatever, like a hardcore scholar taking a point of view that we've been discussing from the fringe and just laying it out there, through, what is this, RZIM, I think, which is Ravi Zacharias' ministry. This is exciting, guys. This is a really good sign. This is some positive news for this community of people who have been discussing these issues. So please share this lecture with people, friends, family. This is something you can be like, hey, please check this out. Because, before you might have been like, hey, check out this video from some guy named Gons. He has this YouTube channel and he's talking about the Bible and AI and stuff, and you should check him out. Yeah, he sounds like a crazy person, right? But if you say, hey, this guy John Lennox, he's a professor of he's actually a mathematician. He's I think a math professor, right? So he understands these algorithmic systems and all these. He explains how AI is not what is projected. A lot of it is hype, and that is true. It's true that a lot of it is hype in the mainstream. But what he does say, and again, he's addressing it, is that the philosophical implications, the extractions that can be made for worldview, and the discussions that take place there, but then also, again, as I've alarmed the people and the publics for so many years, is this idea that this is going to hit us in ways that we're not prepared for. And so, we need to kind of mentally, but most importantly, spiritually prepare for this. Not just having those discussions, but like, hey, what can we practically do here? And that's what I'm seeing in this next generation of people, like younger people, people in your 20s and teens. You guys are the ones that are going to be looking at this head on, where some of your friends and family are going to literally be quote unquote upgraded. Okay. Or at least participate in a very uncomfortable level of merging with the machine for whatever, security purposes, whatever it is. And so I think to create a sort of understanding of that is going to have to take place very quickly, because the practical, hey, what are we going to do about it physically? That's going to start happening quickly and rapidly. And the economic engine that runs this whole thing. And I can get into the discussion of blockchain and all these things that are being put in place so that this system can grow, this AI system that will rip apart humanity. Really, I really think it's going to rip humanity, like publicly visible ripping of humanity in half, in terms of certain people really going after it in this upgrade thing, and other people rejecting it, and perhaps even forming communities that are, sort of isolated from those types of central hubs, and again, it all starts to make sense. Why the beast is allowed to go after the saints. And that being sort of the trigger point of Jesus Christ coming back and saying, okay, this is the point where I must intervene. God must intervene. And that point is coming. I don't know when, but that point will come. And I think we can really begin to see how the whole passage about when these things begin to happen, look up for your redemption draws near. I think there's going to be a day where I'm already looking up every night, but eventually I think where we will look up and we will see him coming on the clouds. Because as he says in Matthew 24, on the Olivet Discourse, if Jesus doesn't come back, all flesh would be destroyed. And man, I just think this is a very, very big topic. And there are so many components to this, because this is just a sliver. You know, we're kind of looking at the tip of the spear. We're looking at the technology and where things are headed. But behind that, there is so much there. Geopolitics. This is something, again, the Age of Deceit 3 will try to sort of address, not in a... Well, I'm not going to really get into it here. I'm not going to try to say like, oh, this thing is this country or this nation. That kind of stuff, I think, just causes a lot of confusion. So what I'm going to try to do is lay out the biblical infrastructure for how some of the components of the beast are described, and try to share that to suggest that maybe we can use that as a way to understand what we might see coming. And again, but you know, there's also the concern with the Middle East, with a certain particular nation state, and what they seem to have planned as part of their agenda to reveal some sort of man who is going to be seen as the Messiah. A lot of prophetic overtones, whether it be the actual fulfillment that have been reading about for centuries, or a shadow fulfillment or a partial fulfillment of a certain kind. I don't know, but we live in some fascinating times, and I think it's very encouraging that at the very least, somebody in academia, a well-respected Christian apologist, is out there taking ideas that we have discussed on channels like this for a few years and making it credible, making it accessible to inquiring minds out there. Again, I hope you guys get something out of this. Thank you for your continued support and prayers. It's definitely needed. The battle is real. The battle is spiritual, and it's real, folks. It's daily. You guys have been the confirmation for me for what I feel God has been leading me to do, which is this work. So thank you guys so much for encouraging me in that way and praying for me and my family. And I will cut it off there. Have an awesome day, guys. God bless.